In 1941, as Nazi forces closed in on Leningrad, over 1 million people would starve to death in what became the longest siege in modern warfare. But deep beneath the frozen streets, a group of scientists were literally dying to protect something more valuable than gold. They were guarding potatoes. Not just any potatoes. These were the genetic keys to feeding the entire Soviet Union, and possibly the future of humanity itself. The siege lasted 872 days. The scientists starved. They refused to eat a single tuber from their collection, even as their colleagues collapsed from hunger around them. 9 of them died protecting those potatoes. Think about that for a second. You're holding food in your hands while you're starving to death, and you don't eat it. That's how critical these varieties were. And did you know that potatoes were once so valuable in Europe that they were literally worn as jewelry by the wealthy? Marie Antoinette wore potato flowers in her hair to make them fashionable, but this isn't about fashion. This is about survival genetics that were forged under the most brutal conditions imaginable, and why you need them in your backyard right now. The USSR didn't just grow potatoes. They engineered them. Soviet agronomists spent decades breeding varieties that could survive Siberian winters, feed millions across 11 time zones, and produce massive yields even when conditions were catastrophic. They created something the West never quite matched. A potato that genuinely didn't care about your excuses. The variety we're talking about today, it's called Nevsky. Officially registered in the Soviet State Cultivar Register in 1976, it's classified as a mid-early table potato, but that bureaucratic description doesn't capture what it really is. Nevsky was bred to succeed where other varieties failed. It thrived in marginal soils. It laughed at cold springs. It produced yields that seemed almost impossible given the conditions. But here's the problem. Before you think any potato will do for serious food security, stop right there. Modern grocery store potatoes are bred for appearance and shipping durability, not survival. They're bred to look pretty under supermarket lights, not to keep you alive when supply chains collapse. The genetics matter, the breeding history matters, and the variety you choose will determine whether you're actually prepared or just playing gardener. And did you know that during the Irish potato famine, the entire catastrophe happened because they were growing essentially one variety? The lumper potato fed millions until one disease wiped it all out. Genetic diversity isn't just botanical trivia. It's the difference between eating and starving. The Soviets learned this lesson hard and bred accordingly. Now, here's where this gets practical for you. You can't exactly order Nevsky potato slips from Amazon. Soviet cultivars aren't sitting in American garden catalogs. But after extensive research, I've identified the closest genetic equivalents available in North America and most of Europe that carry the same survival characteristics. The first is Kennebec. This variety was developed in 1948 specifically for dependability and massive yields. It's a workhorse potato that doesn't demand perfect conditions. It produces consistently, stores well through winter, and has the kind of resilience Soviet breeders would recognize immediately. If you want one variety that simply works year after year without drama, Kennebec is your answer. The second option is Yukon Gold. If you want something that functions as a true table potato, creamy texture, excellent flavor, versatile in cooking, this is your pick. It was bred in Canada, developed in conditions not unlike Russian climates, and it carries that same genetic pragmatism. It's not as heavy yielding as Kennebec, but the eating quality is exceptional. Here's what makes these varieties special. They're not finicky. They don't need perfect soil pH balanced to 3 decimal places. They don't require specialized fertilizers shipped from across the country. They're bred from an era when potatoes had to perform or people didn't eat. That genetic memory matters. Finding these varieties is easier than you'd think. A quick online search will show you farms selling potato slips, already germinated and ready to plant. They'll mail them directly to you. Proper seed potatoes, not grocery store rejects. I personally walked into a random grocery store here in Canada and found Kennebec potatoes being sold for eating. I bought 3 bags, ate 1 bag to confirm they were good, then let the other 2 bags germinate. I've been planting descendants of those potatoes for 5 years now, and the results have been absolutely unbelievable. Each year the plants adapt more to my specific soil and microclimate. Growing these is absurdly simple. You don't need acres. You don't even need a yard. Potatoes grow in buckets, in bags, and stacked tires, in literal trash cans. One plant can produce 10 to 20 potatoes. Plant 10, get 200. Do the math on what that means for food security. The Soviets understood something we've forgotten. Agriculture isn't about Instagram-worthy gardens. It's about calories per square foot, nutrient density, and storage longevity. Potatoes check every box. They provide complete protein when combined with minimal dairy. They store for months in cool darkness. They're packed with vitamin C, potassium, and B vitamins. And they grow almost anywhere humans can survive. Soviet agronomists tested varieties in every climate zone from the Arctic Circle to Central Asian deserts. The varieties that survived that gauntlet aren't just plants. They're genetic survivors. Nevsky was bred from multiple parent lines specifically selected for cold tolerance, disease resistance, and yield stability. Kennebec and Yukon Gold carry remarkably similar genetic profiles, which is exactly why they're the closest equivalents available to North American growers. And did you know that potatoes are one of the few crops that actually improve marginal soil over time? Their root systems break up compacted earth, and when you harvest, you leave behind organic matter that enriches the soil for next year. The Soviets knew this. They used potatoes to rehabilitate agricultural land damaged by war. You can use the same principle in your backyard, or even in urban lots with depleted soil. Here's what you actually do. Get seed potatoes. Let them sprout eyes in a cool, bright location. Cut them into pieces with at least 2 eyes each. Let the cuts dry for a day. Plant them 4 inches deep, 12 inches apart, in rows 3 feet apart. As they grow, mound soil around the stems. This is called hilling, and it's where your actual potatoes form. The first time you dig up a plant and find 20 potatoes where you planted 1 piece, something clicks in your brain. This isn't theoretical. This is actual food security you can hold in your hands. And unlike the complex logistics of wheat or corn, potatoes are almost foolproof. The Nevsky variety specifically was bred to mature quickly, between 80 and 90 days from planting to harvest. That means even in short growing seasons, you get results. Kennebec runs slightly longer at 100 to 110 days, but the yield increase is substantial. Yukon Gold splits the difference at 90 to 100 days with exceptional flavor. Storage is critical, and this is where Soviet breeding really shows its value. These varieties store for months if kept in darkness between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. A basement, a garage, even a buried cooler. The Soviets needed potatoes that could feed people through 6-month winters. That genetic programming persists. But there's something deeper happening here that most people miss entirely. When you grow these varieties, you're not just producing food, you're maintaining genetic diversity that corporations are actively eliminating. Modern agriculture has reduced thousands of potato varieties down to fewer than 100 commonly grown types. Each lost variety is lost genetic information that could be critical when conditions change. Those Soviet scientists who starved to death in Leningrad? They understood this at a cellular level. They were protecting genetic diversity because they knew, absolutely knew, that future survival depended on maintaining these varieties. And did you know that their collection contained over 250,000 plant specimens? They weren't just saving potatoes, they were saving the genetic library of human food security, and they died doing it. That same collection still exists today at the Vavilov Institute in St. Petersburg. It's considered one of the most important genetic repositories on Earth, and the potato varieties they preserved and bred, varieties like Nevsky, represent decades of selection under conditions most modern plants could never survive. When you plant Kennebec or Yukon Gold, you're accessing that same genetic lineage. These aren't boutique heirloom varieties grown for farmers' market aesthetics. These are survival cultivars bred for a simple mandate: produce food reliably or people die. The implications for personal food security are staggering. 100 square feet of growing space can produce 200 pounds of potatoes. That's enough calories to sustain an adult for approximately 100 days. In a backyard and raised beds in an abandoned lot, the location barely matters compared to the decision to actually do it. And here's the coolest part about this. Once you start, the potatoes become self-perpetuating. Save some from each harvest for next year's planting. They adapt to your specific soil, your climate, your growing conditions. After a few generations, you have potatoes that are uniquely suited to your exact situation. This is how agriculture actually worked for thousands of years before corporations convinced us we needed to buy seeds every spring. The Soviet system had many catastrophic failures, but their agricultural science was genuinely world-class. They had to be. They were feeding a massive population across impossible geography with limited resources. The varieties they developed weren't theoretical. They were tested in real conditions by millions of families growing food to survive. That's what you're tapping into with these varieties. Not some romanticized version of farming, but battle-tested genetics that have kept people alive through famines, wars, and collapse. Those potatoes don't care about your soil pH being 6.2 instead of 6.5. They don't care if you miss a watering. They're programmed at a genetic level to survive and produce. Start with 10 pounds of seed potatoes. That's maybe $30 shipped to your door. Plant them. In 3 months, you'll harvest between 100 and 200 pounds depending on conditions. Save 20 pounds for next year. Eat the rest. Repeat. Within 3 years, you'll have more potatoes than you can eat, and you'll be giving them away to neighbors. This isn't complicated. This is accessible food security using the same varieties that fed the Soviet Union through conditions you cannot imagine. Those scientists in Leningrad died protecting this knowledge. The least we can do is actually use it.